In this video, I'm going to give an overview of the threading and AsyncTask learning module. These are a couple of very important concepts that we'll need for programming with Android. It's probably best if I give you an example with a live application. So this is the liveplantplaces.com app, which is you can get in the Play Store. It's a production level application. And on this GPS to plant screen, as soon as the screen renders, or right about that time, a separate thread pops up in the background to download plant names, and that allows you to type in some plant names and then it will autocomplete based on what you've typed. So you see I've started typing Eastern, and it's given us Eastern Redbud and Eastern Wahoo and several other options. So that's part of what we're going to explore in this learning module, is how to have a separate thread that can grab some data and show it in an autocomplete just like so. The important part about it being a threaded application, though, is that thread that's running in the background isn't competing with our user interface thread, so the main thread which runs the user interface. In other words, the user interface is still responding while that thread in the background is running. Let's take a look at search by color, and I can tell you a few other things where threads are going to run on this screen. So with search by color, we can either take a picture or we can open an image gallery. I'm going to go ahead and choose open here. And I'm going to choose the camera, and I'm going to choose, we'll choose this picture here. And what it's going to do now is, you notice it chose about 6 colors from that image. Now, a lot of threading going on here because, number one, it has to take a look at this image and interview it and say, okay, what are the highest frequency colors? Now, that can be a bit of a daunting task if you think of what an image is these days, because images can be quite large. So it has to interview a lot of different pixels and ask them what their colors are. But then one other thing. When I initially released this application, a lot of times I'd take a picture and I would get back a lot of blues and a lot of greens. Blue, because if you're looking up at a tree and taking a picture of a flower in a tree, many times the sky is the black background and that's blue. Now, name a blue flower. There are actually very few blue flowers because the flower color indicates the pollinator for that flower. And many pollinators like bees and birds, insects, things like that, have a very limited color spectrum. It just so happens that no pollinator can see the color blue. Therefore, there are very few blue flowers. There are a few, but not many that are truly blue. So it knocks out blue. Also, I found when I first wrote this app, it would show a lot of green results. But there again, every plant's green, so why bother with that? So it actually grabs a file that contains colors that are legitimate colors that you would see in plants. It has to grab that file in a separate thread. So you open the screen, it grabs the data, the viable color data. Then, in a separate thread, it's looking at this picture, counting all the colors, and it's only including ones that are in that viable colors file. So several threads running to give the user a quick experience. And if you noticed, even on this emulator, which emulators tend to run a little bit slowly, it was able to do that in what appeared to be a very quick time because there were multiple threads running. Now, let's take a look at another use of threads here. I can click on one of these colors, we'll choose this, and it's going to give me a list of plants that match that color. If you take a look right now, you'll see there's a placeholder, the Plant Places P logo. So we can see the list of plants, but we can't yet see the photos. Reason being, it does take a moment to download the photos, and on the live app it would have been refreshed by now. On the emulator it does take a little bit longer, not to mention my internet connection for whatever reason today is very slow. But separately, you'll see what it's doing is a separate thread goes out and grabs those photos and then updates this view. So we're not making the user wait. We're giving the user a bit of a good experience while we're doing some other work, in this case downloading those thumbnails and then populating the user interface. So it feels like the app is running quickly. Imagine if the app froze up while it was waiting for those photos to be downloaded. It would feel really slow. But because we have the results come first and the photos come later, it feels very performant instead. I can choose another color here. We'll see a similar thing happen as it goes and it fetches these colors once again. So one other advantage of having multiple threads is you give the user an opportunity to cancel a long-running action. And it's not as common today as it used to be, but sometimes you deal with software where you would do something like you would press some button to do some action, and then the entire user interface would lock up and you couldn't cancel out of it. And in a long-running activity, a lot of times you want to cancel. Well, that's because that operation is happening on the main thread or on the UI thread, and because the UI thread is locked up doing this activity, it's not able to receive events from the user. Nowadays, using multiple threads is more common. As a matter of fact, in Android, it is required to do long-running operations on a separate thread if it's a network connection. Any type of network needs to be on a separate thread. Well, this is a much better experience for the user. It does require a little bit more work on our part. So that's what we're going to take a look at this week. So, first of all, overview of AsyncTask to run threads in Android. AsyncTask is something that came about in Android quite a while ago. It wasn't in the very first version, I don't believe, but it did come about quite a while ago. And it makes the threading process simpler for us. We don't have to know intimately about threads. So an overview, then we're going to do a hands-on implementation, and then we're going to populate the autocomplete text view. Remember, the autocomplete text view was that on the GPS plant screen where I started typing Eastern. That's the autocomplete text view. We're going to take a look at a little nuance of Java, and that is something called the toString method. And we'll see the importance of the toString method. It's one of those things where if you know what it is, you'll know the answer to a solution to a problem. If you don't know what it is, it will give you a really funny result. So we'll go over all of that in this video. Why doesn't autocomplete text view work? Override toString. That is all very much Android specific. Now, one thing that I will note, it's important to have a good grasp on threads altogether. In Computer Programming 1 and 2, they don't really talk about threads. In enterprise application development, we don't usually talk about threads because threads are container managed typically in that scenario. This class, we do have an opportunity to talk a little bit about threads, both from an Android perspective and also from a general Java perspective. And I really want to take this opportunity to talk about threads just in general in Java. So, a few things. Number one, this video right here, Threads in Java Live Example. This is a video I recorded with some students in a class a couple years ago, and I really liked the way the video turned out because we were essentially acting out how threads work. Now, after that, I go into a series of videos that are, well, I think around the 10-minute mark or so, where I actually show each of these scenarios in code. Now, this is a general Java concept, not an Android-specific concept. And those things that are general Java concepts, a lot of times it's easier if I do something with the traditional main method, which we don't really consider in Android, and also with a more ubiquitous IDE than Android Studio. So these videos I did record for this class, but nonetheless, it is going to use Eclipse just because it's a general concept, something that you can apply in Java in general. I think it'll be helpful, though, because threads are something where you really have to have that foundation to build from and to start building knowledge. And it's kind of hard to have a good starting point unless you know where to start. And that's exactly what these videos are for. So wait and notify thread deadlocks. And then finally, a video on the code review. You might have already seen this video in a previous section, but just remember we do have code reviews, and take a look at the calendar to see when they're due. So a little bit, that one doesn't have to do with threading, but just a reminder, this is a video to show you how to do a code review. I really enjoy the code reviews in this class, because one thing that I say usually, and when I give the live version of this class, is that you're going to learn more from the person to your left and your right, that being your fellow colleagues, your fellow students, than you will from the person in front of you, where I'm the person in front of you. Android changes so quickly, no one person can be the master of everything, so it's really important that we learn from each other's experience. And when doing a code review, you learn by looking at somebody else's code, but you also learn by having somebody else give some feedback on your own code. So that's what we'll take a look at. Let's look at the Scrummy board. So our big focus now is going to be the autocomplete plant names. JSON parse will likely get to next week. So what we want to focus on is threading. So handle networking on a separate thread. We're going to start that. And of course, we're going to finish it, so we'll move it to the finish column. Determine which plant the user selected. We are going to start that, and we're going to finish it, so I'll move it to the finish column. Determine the user typed in a plant name not yet known. I don't think we're going to get to that one this week. That's a fun one, but I don't believe we're going to get to that one this week. Create a model that will link up to autocomplete text view. Yes, we're going to start that, and we're going to finish that one. So half of the tasks for this story we're going to tackle in this learning module. The other ones we'll likely capture in our next one. Next one is going to be really neat as well because we're going to take a look at some JSON parsing. And for JSON parsing, it requires that we do a network activity, which means we either need the threading that we're doing in this learning module, or we need to use a library called retrofit, which makes things a little bit easier on us. So we'll take a look at those next week. If you're thinking of your app and how to add value with your app, think a lot about the different types of data that you can integrate together. And I'll pull back up the Plant Places app here. Think about this list of plants that we're looking at. So we're integrating data from different areas. We have the camera, which is on the user's phone, so that's user-generated data. But then we also have this database of plants, and the plants have pictures, and the pictures have color. So we're able to do a lot of integration of data. And when we integrate data together, we come up with information. This is a major topic these days in computing. And if you're thinking of, you have maybe some entrepreneurial thoughts, you want to start a software business or some kind of app, think a lot about how you can integrate data to make information. Also, think about where the data comes from. You can have publicly available data like we have here with the city of Chicago and also the city of Cincinnati. Reason I point that out, I taught this class several years ago in Chicago, and I found that the students in the class in Chicago were creating a lot of apps that were doing a really good job of integrating city data, of which Chicago has quite a bit. I was teaching the class at the same time at the University of Cincinnati and found some really good apps, but not as much integration. Reason being, Cincinnati didn't have an open data portal as Chicago does. Well, guess what? Now Cincinnati does. And since that's happened, I've seen a whole lot of really neat apps that have come out around food ratings and things like that. So think of that as a kind of source of data. All kinds of things that you can look at here. JSON accessible. Oh, there's the building I work in, by the way. Kind of cool. I can see my desk. Not exactly, but I can see where I sit. If you need some ideas, this is very early on, but I've started to assemble some JSON data feeds that students have used in this class, and I've just made like a JSON dictionary out of it. So Plant Places Plant Name Search, which is the one that we're using, breweries by city, recipes, nutrients, food list, sunrise, sunset API, exchange rates, weather forecast, Bitcoin data, Nobel Prize winners, Nobel laureates, world cities, airport codes, list of countries, companies, artists by song, so on and so forth. So I've started this directory, and you can search as well. So we'll say recipe, like so, and we come up with something like recipe puppy. Maybe you'll have some things you can add to it. I will fully confess, as you see this is a programmer's user interface. I just wanted to hurry up and get some data in there quickly without making it look really pretty. Sometime later, this will look a little bit prettier, but nonetheless, that's a good place to start your search. We'll get into JSON more next week, but it's good now to kind of start thinking about this if you haven't already. So, you have the entrepreneurial idea. Think about where you can get data. Is it City of Chicago, City of Cincinnati? Is it one of these? Or is it crowdsourced data? Is there data that you can get your users to generate? Or is it proprietary data? Is there data that you have that you own? If you can combine these three different sources, you come up with a really magic business model. As a matter of fact, the photo data, these are all pictures that I've taken. So that's a case of proprietary data where it's these are plants that I've GPSed, and even some that have been crowdsourced where other people have downloaded the Plant Places app, go to GPS a plant, they photograph plants, they upload the photos, and then that becomes part of the data that I'm using in the search by color. And then I redeployed that in another app called Plant Flashcards. So you see, in this case, this is an app where it takes those photos that I've crowdsourced or that I've collected, and it shows 4 different plant names along with a photo, and then you click on one, and it will tell you whether you're right or not, and it will kind of give you an up or a down to tell you, yes, that was right, or no, that was incorrect. But nonetheless, you see, we're still dealing with some kind of data. We're still dealing with some kind of proprietary data, or crowdsourced data, or open data, or a mix of all 3, even better. I will say one thing that's a little bit funny at this point. The Plant Flashcards app didn't take long to write. Pretty much to me, it's just a JSON reader that shows a photo. The Plant Places app took much longer to write, but the flashcard app gets a lot more downloads. Frankly, it's a simple concept, and it's a good something to do while I'm waiting in line kind of deal. So nonetheless, that's what we'll take a look at. We're going to take a look at threading and AsyncTask. The one other thing I'll say about the threading videos down here below, because they're general Java and not necessarily Android specific, this will serve you well even if you are not an Android programmer. If you do backend services, microservices, that kind of stuff, or any other kind of user interface programming, these threading concepts will serve you very well. Just kind of good things to know. The video here, the one I did in class, one other note I'll say about this, and I'll wrap things up after that. Through a funny twist of fate, 2 people in this video now work at the same company because of this video. Those 2 people are a student over here on the right and me. We both got our current jobs partially because this video was found by somebody on the internet, and it ended up getting us to where we are now, which I just think is a little bit funny. So anyway, good stuff. I hope you enjoy this learning module, and look forward to seeing your quiz question suggestions. Thank you.